Dad worked on Swift and Company packing plant at the stockyards. I am Louise Strickland Jones. Was born in Fort Worth, Texas, October 22nd, 1922, 21st, 1922. Why are you shaking your head?
24.
No, I was born in 22, Arvel.
I know, but October 24.
No, I was born October 21st, 1922. I know when I was born.
Okay.
October 21st.
Okay.
Gene and I both were born October
Tape
21st.
running?
This is Louise Strickland Jones. I was born in Fort Worth, Texas, October 21st, 1922, on the north side of Fort Worth. My parents were William S. and Jimmy Pearl Strickland. I lived most of my, all of my 18 years on 27th Street on the north side in 3 different houses. Well, Dad worked at the Swift and Company packing plant at the stockyards on the north side, and Mom worked there before they were married, and that's where they met. As far as we know, that's where they met. However, I don't know.
He worked in the smokehouse, and later on he was foreman in the smokehouse where they smoked the hams and bacon. And also he was foreman in the bag factory where they had women that made all the bags for the sausage, packed the sausage in.
I don't know what she did at the packing plant, and of course after they married she never worked outside the home again. She was a homemaker, and of course with 5 children that was a full-time job. I remember they always had a garden, and part of the time when I was growing up we had a cow. And we lived next door. When I was 5, we moved to 2505 Northwest 27th, and that's next door is where my grandmother, Sarah Strickland, whom we call Mammy, lived. And part of the time, Aunt Alma and Uncle Marvin, Daddy's sister, and her husband lived there. Their son W.M. was born while they were living there, and then they moved across the street. So I had family all around me all the time I was growing up. Mom's brother, Ballard Chenault, lived on 28th Street, just a few blocks away. Dad had the house built that we lived in at 2505 next door to Mammy. At Mammy's house, they moved into it, as I understand what Aunt Alma told me. They moved in there about 1905, Mammy and Granddaddy Strickland. Mammy lived at 2504 and we lived at 2500. Mammy lived in a house at 2502 Northwest 27th, and Dad had a house built for us that we moved into in 1927 at 2500 next door. Aunt Alma and Uncle Marvin lived with Mammy at that time, and later, after W.M. was born, they moved to 2505 across the street. So we had family around us just about all the time we were growing up. I used to go to Mammy's house for if I got a spanking at home or something, go over there for sympathy, because she was always the one that sympathized with any problems that you had. I spent a lot of time in her house when I was growing up. I remember she had a blue granite bucket on a washstand in the kitchen. I used to run in there for water. Water always tasted good out of that dipper that she had, that we drink water out of that bucket.
I mean,
She didn't have an indoor facilities. She had
a well?
No, she had city water, but she had to get the water from a faucet that was outside her kitchen door.
In the
Backyard. But she did not have a bathroom. She had an outhouse. I used to spend a lot of time at Mammy's house, and especially if I was disciplined at home, I would run over there for sympathy. she was always sympathetic for anything, any problems that you had. Even after I got older and grown, I would go to her and talk to her. When I was growing up, I used to run into her house. We were out playing and got hot, run into her house, her kitchen, for a drink of water from her bucket that had a blue granite bucket with a dipper. And she had to get her water from a pipe that was outside her door, a faucet that was outside her door. She even she had no indoor plumbing, and she had an outhouse at the back. And we used that too when we were playing. Instead of having to go in the house, we'd just use that outhouse. And she always had lots of flowers in the backyard. Seemed to have a green thumb. Dan was born at that house.
He was born at that house? Mm-hmm. Okay, and which house were you born at?
I was born in another house on 27th Street in about the 2300 block.
Of 27th?
Of 27th Street.
Well,
then we moved to 2403 27th Street. Dad had that house built. And from there, for a short period of time, we lived on Prairie Avenue, wasn't it, Harvel? Columbus Avenue, while the house on 2500 was being built. I was born at the one on 2300. We have pictures of all those houses.
Okay.
We also have a picture of the front porch of the house where Harvel and Arvel were born. Aunt Alma Strickland was my favorite aunt. She and her husband, Marvin, lived across the street. She was Alma Strickland and married a man named Marvin Strickland, spelled Land. I spent most of my childhood running back and forth across the street between our house and hers. I spent a lot of time helping to raise W.M. practically. He was 6 years younger than me, and I always enjoyed going over and playing with him. She was, even after I got grown, she always lent a sympathetic ear to any problem that I might have and helped me through many things. She was my second mother, I guess you'd call it. All my life I was interested in drawing, and would draw at the blackboard that we had. And later on, my first oil paints and art lessons was from a woman on 27th Street that taught me, and my lessons were paid for by Arvel and Harvel. They were working at that time after school, and I believe they probably bought my first oil paints. It was a little set of oil paints. And this lady showed me how to paint. I did 2 paintings under her, and that was the only lessons that I had until, well, way up probably in the 1970s when I took some lessons. And I had to, most of it I learned by doing, learned by myself. And in 1979, I took an old photograph of Mammy's house next door. It was the house itself. The picture was made about 1905. And there was also a photograph of her in a long dress and a bonnet. She was out in the backyard when this picture was made, and she was sweeping leaves. So I put her in the front yard in this painting and had her sweeping up a big pile of leaves. It was burning. But mainly I wanted to get the house and just her. And I have that painting in my living room. I won Student of the Week in high school, and they took a photograph of me in a little article that they put in the school paper. When I graduated from high school, I was named Artist of the Year, or artist from that best artist from that graduating class. Dad taught me to drive when I was 14 years old. We used to go up to Buck Sampson Park, and he taught me how to drive. And when I graduated from high school, he helped me buy my first car. He paid it was $250, and he paid $50 down for me, and I paid the rest of it out at $10 a month. I think at the time I went to work for Worth Food Markets. Clyde got me the job, and I worked at the bakery department. And I think I made $10 a week, and part of it went for room and board for Mom and Dad, and part of it went for the car payment, and I had a little left over. I have a favorite photo in this album of me and Dan, and he was about 2 years old and I was about 11. It was made at the studio, and I got my first haircut in what they called back then a Marcel. All that time, from the time I was born, I wore bangs, and I always hated those bangs. And this Marcel was, you took a curling iron and curled your hair. I think Mom did it. I worked at Worth Food Markets, and worked first in the bakery department, and then later on, most of the time during the war, I worked as a checker, checking groceries, and I enjoyed the work. We had our gas was rationed, but I was always able to get gas enough to drive back and forth to work, and for Margaret and I to go to a movie on Friday or Saturday night, and sometimes I rode the bus, but most of the time I drove my little car. We were rationed with groceries, meat and sugar and flour and things like that, especially sugar. Meats were rationed. We ate a lot of Spam, and meat was pretty scarce. We always ate well, but Mom was a good cook. And I lived with them in the house on Long Avenue in River Oaks after we moved there in 1940. I lived with them until I married in 1942. Well, actually, I lived with them there until my husband came home from the war, and that was in 1945. From the time I can remember, Mama's mother, Catherine Chenault, lived with us. All the time I was growing up, she lived with us there at 2500 Northwest 27th. And I know I used to sleep with her, and she also taught me many things, as well as I guess she helped discipline me too, but she taught me how to make a cake and pie. That was the first time I was ever able to cook anything. And but she died when I was 12 years old, so I don't have any later memories of her. Dad didn't do a lot of disciplining as far as spankings and things like that. I remember that they usually used a switch. What they called a switch was a little limb off of a bush or something. But the last spanking that he ever gave me was with a razor strop, and I was 15 years old, and Arvel caused me to get that spanking. I was listening to the radio, listening to Jack Armstrong. That was a serial show on the radio. And they came in from work and switched the radio to another station, listening to music or whatever it was they wanted to listen to, and a little bit of an argument ensued, and I said I was listening to the radio first, and Dad came in and intervened and told me that they needed to have the radio because they had been at work. And I guess I talked back to him a little bit because he got the razor strap and whipped me. I felt that was quite unfair because I thought was listening to the radio first, and besides, I thought at 15 I was just a little bit too old to be spanked. In 1938, I was in my first year of high school, and of course Dad had been retired for a good long while, and money was a little bit scarce, and I needed a winter coat. Arvel was working at Hub Clothiers downtown, and he was able to get things wholesale. But even at that, Dad and Mom couldn't afford to buy one, but he bought my coat for me to wear to school. I've never forgotten it. 2 years later, in 1940, when I graduated from high school, we still didn't have a lot of money. And so Clyde and Inez bought me my dress for graduation dress that I wore when I had my graduation ceremonies. It was white sharkskin. I thought I was really dressed up. Clyde was also instrumental in my Mom and Dad allowing me for my very first date at age 16. Bob Walters, the man I finally married, asked me for a date. He was 6 years older than me. So Mom and Dad thought he was just a little bit old. But Clyde told them that that was better than some of those wild high school kids. The first carving that I did was a big fish with scales that I made a holder for Arvel's rod and reels. They were building a lake cabin, and we went out to help them out one weekend. I had bought Arvel Jr. a little $1.98 wood carving set for his birthday. He had that out there, and I found a piece of wood and proceeded to. I didn't have anything to do, so I decided to carve that. It was the only carving I had ever done, but I liked it so well that I continued to do quite a bit of carving in later years. Margaret still has that carving of the fish, and about a year ago, Vicki asked if she still had it, and I told her that she did. Since Vicki has a lake house now, she would like to have it. So I asked Margaret if I could buy it back from her, and she refused. She said if I did that, Arvel and Mark would have a fit. They were going to fight over that fish. I married Bob Walters in 1942. He was overseas in the war for about 3 years, and Sandra, he came back in 45, and Sandra was born in 1946. Sandra was born in 1946, and Vicki was born in 1948. I got married in 1942 to Bob Walters, and he spent 3 years in the service overseas. He came back in 1945. Sandra was born in 1946, and in 1947 we moved to Haltom City on Highland Street, and in November of that year, Mom had surgery, and in order to recuperate, me to help her, they moved in with us, and they had sold their house on the High Garden Road and was in the process of building another. And so they really didn't have a place to live at that time. But during that time, in January, Daddy got sick. He died in the hospital of a stroke, cerebral hemorrhage, January the 28th, 1948. Mom stayed with us for a while and then with Inez for a while until things could be arranged, and she bought a house then on Hazel Avenue in the 2500 block. May of 1948, Vicki was born. Sandra and Vicki, now Sandra is a teacher. Vicki got a degree in art and lives in Houston, works, helps her husband in his work, and does wall murals and is a sculptor also. Sandra has 2 children. I have 2 grandchildren, Matt and Marcy. And Matt just graduated recently from University of Texas. Marcy's in college. I have a picture that I guess belonged to Grandma Chenault of our great-grandfather, John David Blair. He lived in Red River County, and when he was about 18, he fought in the Mexican War, and later on fought for the Confederates in the Civil War. We have some history on that. And I also have a ribbon that he wore when he came to Fort Worth in 1887 to attend a reunion of the veterans of the Mexican War. I have an old cigar box that belonged to Grandma Chenault, and then there are some mementos concerning our great-grandfather, John D. Blair. And it was this photo that I mentioned before, and the ribbon that he wore when he came to Fort Worth for the veterans of Mexican War. And also in there was an old pocketbook. It opens up into about 3 or 4 sections, and inside there is it's an old leather pocketbook, and inside is a thimble that he used during the Civil War to mend his clothes. I've always been close to my sister-in-laws, all of them, and especially during the war, Margaret and Bessie Jo and I were close. Margaret and I did many, many things together. We took lots of photographs, and Margaret and Bessie Jo spent lots of time in our house, especially on Sundays for Sunday dinner. Margaret and I went to many movies. Every time there was a new movie come to town, we probably went to see that movie, and we enjoyed each other. We still do. I'm close to my sister-in-laws. Margaret and I and my husband Arvel played 42 together and raised our kids together. We spent a lot of time at their lake house when they had that. We've always enjoyed each other. Our family has always been close, all of us. The very next carving that I did after I did the fish was a fireplace screen that Inez asked me to do for her. And she's always been one of my biggest boosters for my art and my carving and my painting. And she also encouraged me and introduced me to antiques and always encouraged me in that respect. She has several of my paintings and carvings and shorebirds in her home and always brags on me, always gives me more credit than I really am due. About a year and a half ago, Gina and I drove over to 27th Street. We wanted to see the old I wanted to see the old neighborhood. And we drove by the old house on 2500 where we used to live. And it was so dilapidated and so sad looking that when I got home I couldn't help but write this poem. I call it The Old House. This house, one time my home, where life and love once dwelled, now stands so cold and still, just a sad and empty shell. It seems it's just there waiting for loved ones to appear, whispering stories of the past, of love and joy and tears. Memories flood my mind and soul, and I can plainly see my mother standing at the door, calling out to me. I can hear my brother's laughter, and I can see us there at play. An essence of our spirit lives in that old house today. I can see beyond the peeling paint, the sagging doors and wall, and if I listen carefully, I can hear my mother call. I can hear my mother call.
I was born in 1944, August 21st. And the earliest memories that I have of my dad was when he came home from the Army. I have a memory of him sticking his head in the door, and I was standing in my crib. That was at the Prairie Street apartment where Mom lived at the time.
Okay. Okay. 5, 4, 3.
And my brother Mark was born in 49, and I remember when they brought Mom home on it and brought her in the house on the gurney, and I held her hand all the way in the house because she had been gone for seemed like a couple of weeks, probably only a week, but seemed like a long time to me.
Okay. 5, 4, 3.
I always enjoyed music. I don't know why. I heard it a lot when I was real young. Knew where it came from till years later, but it was a song by a guy named Prince Albert Hunt, who had a Western swing band around here, probably in the 30s. And later I made a recording of the song. But I remember my mom would go to Archenhold to pick my dad up, and she would go in and leave me in the car, and the radio would be on. I remember hearing a lot of music on the radio, baubles, bangles, and beads, and that 50s era pop music, pre-rock and roll. And then, of course, in here in my bedroom in the summer, the head of my bed was right at a window, and the window was open, and I could hear the Jacksboro Highway. I could hear the music from the clubs down there. There was a jukebox on the front porch of a fruit stand called the Green Front. There was a little bar in there and a watermelon stand and a jukebox on the porch, and they played loud hillbilly music. And of course, they closed that place up around dark, but Skyliner Ballroom right down here had a canvas roof that they would roll back in summer on summer evenings, and I could hear the road bands that would play down there. And I don't know who, Jimmy Reed later on, but I don't know who was touring then, but I would hear them. It had horns, a lot of horns and guitars, and I was just exposed to a lot of music, and it just seemed kind of natural. I just kind of fell into wanting to play. I never really wanted to be a singer, and what I wanted to be was a guitar player, and nobody that I knew could sing the songs that I wanted to get to play, the kind of stuff I wanted to play. I had to sing the songs, and so I got to be the singer by default, and I never did really enjoy being a singer, but it just kind of fell on me, and they kept paying me to do it, so I kept on doing it.
I might have you give us 5, 4, 3.
I can remember being all Christmas times and when the family would gather around here. I had a little, and we would sing, whatever songs that we knew. I've got a recording of us singing an Everly Brothers song. It was a lot of fun. They never sounded very good, of course, but we were enthusiastic about it. It was a lot of fun. Sandra and Vicky and Mark were younger at that time and they were around watching us, but they didn't ever get in on the singing, and as far as I remember. But it was interesting. It was a lot of fun.
Okay.
Sometime in the late 50s, 57, 58.
Let me go ahead and start you over again. Okay, so I'll have that, because sometimes, things could roll up to it. So 5, 4, 3.
Sometime in the to build a cabin there. But for several years, it consumed most all of our time on the weekends, and was quite an experience for me. I don't know if it had been the first thing that Dad had built or not, but it was the first time that I had ever been in on the building of anything like that. And of course, my job was mostly pulling nails and nailing up shingles and so forth. But it was an interesting experience, and I've benefited from the building experience later in my life. But we had a lot of fun at that cabin. Jerry Kellum had a boat, and we did a lot of water skiing. And of course, Dad bought a boat a few years, or pretty soon after we built the cabin. Dad bought a little boat, and he liked to fish, and I liked to water ski, and so we did both. We did an awful lot of it, and learned all kinds of tricks just out of boredom. We'd get to where we'd ski so well that we would practice falling down just to have something to do.
Okay.
I got interested in music in junior high school, about the latter part of the 7th grade or the 8th grade maybe. And of course, I think it was during my 8th grade year in shop class. I built the whole body out of cherry wood, and bought some parts. Mom bought me some parts over at Tennyson Guitar Shop, a D. Armand pickup and a fingerboard, and some tuning keys and a tailpiece, and put that guitar together. And I didn't have an amplifier. I remember, I don't know where, I guess he read it in the paper or something, but I remember Dad and I driving to Dallas to buy this amplifier. It was a little Fender amplifier, tweed Fender amp about this big.